Hi, guys. So thanks for coming this month to our maturity model for Microsoft 365 practitioners. This month, we're going to be covering the topic of customization and development. And our guest star today is Zoe Wilson.
Hi, everyone.
In the OneDrive sweater.
In the OneDrive, in her Windows jumper, her cloud jumper. What do you call it? Your cloud jumper?
My cloud jumper, yeah.
Her cloud jumper. So do you want to go ahead and go forward? Also the team, I don't know if we wanted to mention the people on team. So we're going to go over basically what the Microsoft Maturity Model is, and we'll talk through our competency with Zoe. She's got a lot of fantastic insights. This is going to be a great conversation. At the end, make sure to be camera ready because we're going to put everybody in the camera, take a picture, and let's go.
To pick up. So we're talking about our latest artifacts. So recently we worked, the team worked on the governance, risk and compliance, which has been released. I believe modern infrastructure is well on the way, isn't it? I know Simon and Sharon, you guys have been busy beavering away behind the scenes there. But the purpose of the maturity model is to improve the organization through the use of technology and through the Microsoft 365 platform, but it's not technology focused. It's focused on the business, using business language and trying to help businesses who need to achieve the same things. Good at communication, good at collaboration, improving the way that they manage their content, maybe the way that they produce and develop software and customize their 365 platform. And it's a way of socializing content and how to do things better. And it's a community effort. So modern infrastructure is coming soon. Next slide, please. We'd love you to get involved and present. Always look for people to present a case study. I've nearly had someone say that they would do it a couple of days ago, so maybe we'll get our first one there. But if people have used the maturity model in any way, shape, or form, we would love to hear your experiences. Looking for you can contribute on GitHub by creating pull requests, and if you don't want to contribute, give us some ideas of things which you think are missing or could be better. We've got links here to our links to the running workshop spreadsheet and our previous recordings. Now that we've been going for over a year now, haven't we? So please get involved, and the links are all there. So the maturity model, we've got our 5 levels. I see a lot of the same faces and names in the people tab. So quite a few have been through this before. The maturity model starts at level 100, where it's sort of that initial chaotic state, working its way up through to level 500. We kind of say that level 300 is where we think organizations should be to have a pretty robust process and service and a competency, whereas beyond level 300 we started using quantitative techniques to be able to measure how well we're doing in that competency, how we can make improvements, and level 500 using those measurements to optimize the way that we deliver our competencies. The next slide, please. And the next one we've got is kind of the same thing, but on the right there we've got the intent. So taking each of those levels, what are we trying to achieve? Level 100, things are on fire, we're just trying to keep the lights on. Level 200, we're starting to realize we need to do things in a better way. So how do we do that? Level 300, we've got a defined way of working, and we want to make sure that people are doing that and it's being consistent. And then level 400, as I was saying, we're measuring, we're analyzing, we're taking actions to make improvements. And level 500, that nirvana, where AI is doing everything, and we're making an innovative organization which is constantly improving. Next slide.
I think it's worth mentioning here, Simon, and you're right, a lot of familiar names, but every competency, your organization is probably at different levels and different competencies, and that's a good thing. you want to make sure that you're focusing on the competencies that really matter for your organization based on what you do. Content management is something that maybe a lot of organizations would like to be good at, but things like security and custom development and things like that may not be as important to you, or may not be something where you're striving for higher levels.
That's a very good point, Mark. Thank you. So we've also got a new slide. This came in with when we were talking about governance, risk, and compliance. So how we sort of see the levels building on top and where we see each level. So it's not all cases, but level 100, it's new teams being spun up, new startups, new processes being introduced, or new competencies being introduced into an organization. Maybe they've just switched on their Power Platform. And level 200, this is where organizations, I think it's where my organization is, where we're maturing, we're learning, we're moving our way to a defined process in a way that we like to work. And then level 300 is around established organizations which have been around, they've understood what the things they need to do, probably hit some problems and learn from those, so that they've got a process which is and a way of working which is robust. And then level 400 is where you're evolving those competencies, you're becoming successful, efficient organizations. And then finally level 500, your best of breed, custom development, you're delivering a new version every 10 seconds. You're doing 10,000 deployments a day, maybe, in the customization development world. So yeah, those exemplars, which are really pushing the boundary.
Microsoft is begging you to write white papers about you.
I think this image is fantastic because it makes it so clear cut. But I think one of the things we have talked about as a group that I would like to say, to Mark's point, is that you might have different things for different competencies. But if you can at least set your goal of having an average of all of your competencies getting to at least a 300, then we feel like you've got things going on in the way that they should, and everything is established, and the rest is kind of gravy.
Yeah, exactly. Could someone else like to talk? I've just been too.
I'll go. So this week we're talking about customization and development, that competency, and Zoe's going to give us her insights. We're going to take the summer off, and our next session will be staff and training in on September 20th with Heather. Help me, Heather. My brain is not. Severino. Sorry, that's nothing to do with Heather, everything to do with my old mind. Heather Severino will be joining us then. So we're going to take a few months off. If there are things that you'd like to discuss in the interim, we're all still available, and you can reach out to us through Twitter or all the usual mechanisms that are on the slides at the end. So thank you to everyone who came in April. Our list is pretty healthy. Look at all the applause for yourselves. I think we've got some pretty good attendance. We've got some regular people who come. It's awesome that you're making time in your day to improve your skills in this area. We've got one session coming up in the Sharing is Caring initiative, which is another part of the P&P effort. There's a community docs session on May 17th at those times, depending on your time zone. That session is often the second one after the first time contributor sessions, but one of the things that it helps you do is make contributions to the articles that we have in the maturity model. David and others run those sessions, and they really take you through working with GitHub and the articles in the repo to be able to make any kind of change. Sometimes it's we missed a parenthesis closing, or we've got a piece of bad grammar, or it could be something like writing a new article, and those sessions will help you figure that out. As I mentioned, September 20th will be our next call. We do meet every third Tuesday of every month, except for the next 3 months we're going to take off for the summer. And we always like to take a picture of everybody in together mode, right? Because that seems to be the only reason that we use together mode.
It does. So if anyone would like to share their camera, I see some popping in. I'm going to share my screen and start recording in a moment.
Wait. I just joined. Give me a sec.
No problem.
Oh, great background as well. I'm happy with that.
Whoever that was, could you take that seat in the front on the right, please?
Someone's making a call up front to get more people in, so it's awesome. All right, we got room for a little bit more. Anybody? We got 24 seats available, so going once.
No ensigns in red shirts this week. That's good.
That's right. All right, let's wave to the community, everybody. Woo! Excellent. We could act like we're in space going,
Whoa!
Crazy. All right. Very good. Looks great. Thank you. We'll hand it back to anybody who would like to take over.
I think Marc got it.
I got it.
Okay.
Coming at you. No. And of course, it doesn't want to go to the slide that I asked it to. Zoe, why don't you start talking about yourself? I'm getting to that slide next.
Brilliant, thank you. So first of all, hi everyone, and thanks so much for having me join you today. My name is Zoe Wilson, and I'm going to start by saying I do feel like a little bit of a fraud sitting here in front of you planning to talk about customization and development, because I'm not a developer, and actually I haven't been a hands-on techie for, I don't know, a few years now either, since I moved into leadership roles. I work for a UK partner called Agilicis as the Director of Innovation and Customer Success, but my background is all things Microsoft 365, and more specifically with SharePoint, if you go further back in my career. And I fell in love with SharePoint because it allowed me to solve problems and build solutions for end users. I got to play with what I saw as cool tech, and more importantly, I got to work with people from across all parts of the organisations that I worked in. And that really helped me to understand business problems and, more importantly, how tech can solve them. I did low code before it was trendy, so I cut my teeth on things like InfoPath, Nintex, SharePoint Designer workflows. I even K2 for a little bit, but that was really too hard for someone who's actually not a developer. And the reason for saying this is that I've suffered firsthand from the lack of mature processes and from having to figure it out, completely from scratch, actually. And I've learned about the need for maturity the hard way. I'm an MVP for Office Apps and Services. I'm quite active in the tech community. And if any of you are going to be in Scottish Summit or at Comsverse next month, please do come and say hello. If I don't already know you, I'd love to meet you and get to know you a little bit better. And the two cats that you can see on screen, those are two of my 6 cats who are normally in the background of all of the Teams calls that I'm on, but I've had to lock them out of my room because they're being a little bit naughty today. Brilliant. Do you want to move on? Right, okay, so today then we're talking about how you can increase maturity across customization and development. And as you might have guessed from my intro, I'm not going to talk to you about coding standards, source control, DevOps, platforms, languages. All of those things are obviously important, but particularly as you move up the maturity curve, I think you need to know which of those things you're working with. But actually, there are some really fundamental things that need to be in place to allow for maturity when it comes to customizing and developing. And what you can see are some of the highlights that the team pulled together, which demonstrate the types of behaviours and activities that we typically see at the maturity levels within an organisation. So if you start at level 100, I think what you see here is kind of one extreme or the other. When we were talking yesterday, we kind of described this as either the wild, wild west, where everything's turned on, everything's enabled for everybody. People are just going off and doing whatever they want, and you've kind of got no idea what people are doing, really. Versus one that I've seen quite a lot working with the UK public sector, which is where they just turn everything off. They're so scared of people doing the wrong thing. And actually, I've heard clients talk about this as the next access database problem. They don't want users going out and just spinning up loads of things that will become the next access database, where they've got to support it, they've got to figure out how it works, they've got to figure out what to do with it. So I was just looking at the comments. Yeah, disabled because IT is afraid. And I see that a lot. The problem as well when IT turn it off is it's super hard then to actually be able to turn that on and start using it. And that just stifles innovation across the organization. Then if you start to move to level 200, I think, we've got developers who are probably overwhelmed with just far too much work for one team to accomplish. From a level 100 perspective, you've probably got one person who's doing the full end-to-end thing. So they're doing the requirements gathering, the business analysis, they're assessing which tools to use, they're building it, they're QAing it, they're testing it, they're deploying it into live, they're supporting it when they realise it doesn't work properly, because they've not had anybody peer review what they're doing or provide any sensible challenge. And again, I've experienced this early in my career when I didn't know any better. What happens once you've done one solution, that's kind of fine. Once you've done a few, you've got this kind of problem of all this stuff that you need to support, and this demand going up with people who are just asking for new solutions and more things, and it just creates this really, really massive bottleneck. And this is typically when teams start to become aware of a need to have mature processes. They need to have processes at all, really. And then as we continue up that maturity curve, so we start to see at level 300 a methodology being selected, and it doesn't really matter what this is as long as you pick one and you make sure that people understand what it is and how it works, what the roles are that are involved in that, with training on it. You need to put your arms around citizens developers, so make sure that they've got governance guardrails in which they can operate, that they understand the rules of engagement, and that they've got a little bit of help as well. And obviously, again, as you move further up, all of this becomes more robust. It becomes, it becomes kind of stricter. You've got more automation built in. And by the top of the maturity curve, I think one of the things that was mentioned when we caught up yesterday, which was really interesting to me, was this concept of enterprise IT being seen as an asset rather than a liability. And Sharon or Simon, I don't know if you want to just, expand on that one a little bit more.
Yeah, so I mean, we both had different points of view, didn't we, Sharon? But but with synergy there, from my perspective, it was understanding what you already have, so you don't reinvent the wheel. You build up this portfolio of solutions which have been built, and understand what they do, and understand what's available in the 365 platform as well. So you're not reinventing the wheel. I think Sharon, you are sort of more from a even higher perspective. Around the enterprise architecture side, weren't you?
Yeah. So one of the things that we're seeing a lot, especially like to your point with all these apps and everything moving around, is just that need for enterprise planning, enterprise architecture, enterprise knowledge. And I think, when we get to this kind of level of enlightenment in customization and development, all the things that we're making, all the things that we're doing, all the things that we're planning, we get a level of understanding and management around what are we doing and what do we have and what do we not have and things like that, to the point where now all of a sudden we can get ROI out of our IT group, and we understand that what we're putting in and investing in is what we actually need to get, and that it's, providing value back to the business, as opposed to, I think, at the earlier levels, we're making things so that we can solve problems, but we're not necessarily at an enterprise level financially keeping track of kind of how that's working, more than just can we pay the people we have.
Yeah, and I think that's super interesting, because one of the things that we talked about yesterday was understanding what the true cost of something is. And actually, if we move to the next slide, so I think this is a really important question. Are you making for the sake of making, or whether you actually need to build this thing that you're being asked for? And if you look at this line at the bottom, which is what we were just talking about, will it cause more problems than it solve? Actually, is it, how much? What is the true cost of this thing that we're going to build? When you look at the lifetime cost of support and maintenance, any dependencies that it introduces, I think sometimes, particularly at the lower maturity levels, people do just go off and build because they've got a tool and they kind of know that it's going to help them solve the problem without understanding how it fits into that wider ecosystem. And these are some really useful things to consider. But actually, there's a question that I was reflecting on, which isn't on here, which is does the functionality already exist in some other application? So, and it kind of ties into enterprise planning, but I see this in the public sector frequently where people are asking for apps and they don't understand that across their organization, they might have 5 or 10 that already do the thing that they're trying to do, but they're asking for this specific thing, or they're asking for something to be built, or for access to tools to build something, because that's what they know, that's what they've been told that they need to do. So it's really, really important to understand what the business is actually trying to achieve. You know, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? And to get this right, the analysis stage is super important. So it's really vital that we understand the different user personas, you know, what the different types of personas are going to be doing in the application, the business processes that underpin whatever it is that is being requested, and how it needs to be used, you know, what those typical use cases look like. And then this allows decisions to be made about how it should be developed and how its life cycle is going to be managed, including support. And I think from a maturity perspective, that's absolutely key. Sharon, do you want to add anything further on enterprise planning here?
I think that was brilliant. I think that's exactly the point is, you know, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And I think at a level of competency for specifically for customization development, you have to really put the effort in. And I think the problem with customization development is so many people just make for the sake of making instead of thinking about what they're doing and what the purpose is and what the value is.
Yeah, and I think it really demonstrates the need for a business analyst type role as well. So I know in my experience, if I go and ask a techie for something, they're going to give me a solution using the technology that they know, whether it's a developer who can build something with the toolkit they've got, whether it's you know, an M365 architect, a ServiceNow architect, a Dynamics architect, whatever it is. You talk to them about a problem and the answer is their platform, or you know, the thing that they're most comfortable with. So having that interface before you get to the developer type roles who can actually understand what the business problem is and start to map that out, I think is super key. Because you know, if you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail, doesn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, SharePoint is that, isn't it? We've how many things have we built on SharePoint over the years, which we probably shouldn't have done, you know, or wouldn't do now. So.
Yeah, but hey, what a great segue into our next slide.
Yeah. Yeah, so we've mentioned citizen developers a couple of times, and as that approach to customizing and developing is maturing, I think it's crucial that the role of citizen developers becomes well understood. And typically, when we use this term, we're talking about people who don't work in IT. They sit in different parts of the business, who are using technology to solve their own problems. And citizen developers generally start out as end users who like to tinker. You know, they're generally quite driven, switched on people. They've got ideas how to solve their own problems, and they might actually be a little bit frustrated that IT is a bottleneck that they can't get past. So they start to research and they become aware that there are tools that are going to allow them to start to build simple solutions that can help them get things done more effectively. And when we think about this in terms of maturity, actually, then it's not just thinking about citizen developers and what they need, but it's taking it a step before that and thinking about it from the end user perspective. So how does an end user become a citizen developer? And is that something that's understood and documented? Is there a process for that within your organization? Or in the absence of that end user having the desire or the ability or the time to be a citizen developer, what is the process for them to ask for stuff? You know, is there an innovation funnel? How do you get ideas from people? What is the selection criteria? How do you determine whether to configure, to buy, to build? You know, who actually makes those decisions, and who understands how all of this fits into the business enterprise architecture? And then for an end user who does want to become a citizen developer, how do they get the training and the help that they need? How do they have environments provisioned where they can build stuff in a dev environment completely segmented from anything that's live? And quite often with citizen developers, what we see is that they start to build simple things, and then as they get more confident, you know, they might start to do things that are a little bit more sophisticated. But typically they'll hit a point where the solution has either become too complex, or they're way out of their comfort zone and they need help. And what does that need to look like? What type of help do we give citizen developers when they get to that point? You know, is this an IT burden? Do we understand what that looks like? Who supports what they build? You know, do they support it themselves? What happens if they leave? Is it documented? What is the you know, what needs to be true for things created by citizen developers to be accepted into production or into general support by IT? You know, is there a QA process for this and a list of acceptable criteria? And I think it's, you know, these are all really important things that we need to start to understand so that we can put our arms around those people who work across the business, who ultimately know how to solve their problems better than IT do. You know, IT is the enabler for innovation. We're not the innovators. We're the people that help the people who, you know, are at the coalface, who are doing the kind of truly specialist jobs, who understand what their own business problems are. You know, this is about enabling them to innovate and solve those. And this is where technology really can enable it, but then there does need to be guardrails and support for them so that you know, they can kind of do this in confidence without thinking that they're going to expose all of the company data or, you know, mess something up horribly.
It's interesting because I think citizen developers on some level are almost held to higher standards than the developers in IT. You know, you ask a developer in IT, well, where's the documentation for that system you wrote? Maybe there is some, maybe there isn't. So, you know, it's not like everyone in IT does everything perfectly either. So I think working with citizen developers, if you're in IT and you're working with citizen developers, it's an opportunity for IT to get better at what they do, because they ought to be examining what it is that they want these citizen developers to be doing and making sure that they're doing it themselves. And you know, it just because they're not in IT doesn't mean they're evil and that they're going to build these horrible systems that no one's ever going to be able to support. Everyone's got a story of that, but they don't talk about all the successes.
Right. Okay. So so for this first governance story, I couldn't actually give a name of a customer, but I have got quite a few customers who are in this scenario. And this is, I mean, I talked about this a little bit earlier, where you know, typically when Power Platform specifically first started becoming more of a thing, what I saw with lots of UK public sector was just this massive fear. You know, they didn't understand it. They just thought it would be a huge risk. So they turned everything off. And we've managed to work through this with some of them and get them to a point where we've put the Centre of Excellence in place and we're starting to work with them to empower some of their staff to build things. But it's been a really, really painful process to do that. And I'm sure this is like a massively common story. The other one is where people think they're not using something like the Power Platform, and then actually you put the Centre of Excellence in place and run the reports and just show them how many people across the organisation have been connecting to all kinds of weird and wonderful things because there is absolutely no governance. So, you know, I think there's a huge amount of potential with tools like this. I really do. And I think getting that kind of base level governance in place for it is really key to help to be able to manage that kind of that fear and just provide visibility. The one I really wanted to talk about though was the Met Police service. So the Met Police have about 55,000 users, I believe. And within the UK, the Microsoft 365 implementation for policing it's had to be delivered to standards designed by what's called the National Enabling Programme, which has, they've got blueprints that have kind of higher levels of security. And what we saw with other police forces was that they weren't willing to put the Power Platform in because there were I don't think it had been fully documented by the NEP, so they just said, right, we're not going to do it again. It's too scary, too risky, so let's leave it. But the Met Police were great, and they actually, they've got 55,000 people, huge demands on their time, and what they really wanted to do was to be able to give people the tools to innovate. So maybe about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we implemented the Power Platform Centre of Excellence for them. And we started running some app in a day sessions for citizen developers. And I think we trained about, 150 to 200 people. And I went to dig out the stats. They've now actually got, because they've been doing some of this internally as well, they've got over 400 app makers within their organisation. And they've developed over 1,000 apps across the police force. I think it's about 1,100 Canvas apps and over 200 SharePoint list apps, which is just absolutely staggering. Those are kind of police officers, they're frontline workers who are essentially solving their own problems with the tools that the police have given them. And their maturity it's absolutely still improving. They're still on their way up that maturity curve, but because they took some time to think about this up front, they were able to really set the organization up for success. And one of the leaders there, when I was talking to him about this at the start of the process, what he was really keen to do was to actually use this as a way to test the need for certain apps, so that they could say, right, okay, so there's this thing that works and it's really solving a problem, but actually it's not as scalable as we'd like in the Power Platform. So we're going to get someone to develop this using another tool set. But they see this as a really quick way to test whether things work. And I just think it's a fantastic example of what you can do when you do put some of the right governance in place.
It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as you're moving up that maturity process, you do need to start implementing processes and to pick a methodology that the organisation is going to work for. Doesn't matter which one of these you pick, as long as you pick it and you start to put the processes in place that follow it, and you provide people with training and the support that they need to make it work. Different organizations have different preferences for different methodologies, whether it's DevOps, Agile, there's everyone, I think, has their own specific flavor. I think it's more about making sure that you've kind of got this and that you understand what the roles are in the process and that people follow the process.
Yeah, I think methodology is like such a crazy discussion, and I've had it in so many places. And anybody you talk to is, is there one right methodology? And I think that the important note to take away from a maturity level discussion is that it's not about which methodology, it's about do you have a methodology? Have you subscribed to something? And here's what I'm going to say. Any methodology done wrong is the worst methodology. Any methodology done correctly is probably the best methodology, because at the end of the day, their methodologies are there to support you to be a mature organization and do the right things. And as long as you pick one and you learn it and you follow it and you subscribe to it and you're culturally embracing it, I think you're going to have more success than any other methodology done incorrectly or incompletely. So I think that's the big takeaway from the methodology bullet point. And we could spend an hour discussing the different types and how to do them. And it's cute because, in the chat, some of the very first questions, well, what about a Scrum? What about a backlog? What about, pairing? What about, mob programming? Let me come up with some more buzzwords, right? It's not about, are we doing these things? It's, did you pick a methodology? Are you following it? Are you embracing it? And are you doing what you need to be doing?
I think it's also really important as an organization to understand that these are methodologies defined somewhere else by other people. You bring them in, you choose what's good and bad for you. It's a lot like this maturity model. It's not, you may decide you're going to follow it to the letter of the law, but that may actually not fit you well. So you might end up pulling from a number of these different methodologies and using the pieces that work. And then after you've done that, don't be too much of a slave to it. I mean, you have to understand that you've chosen those guardrails so that you're going to be more successful. But when you need to step outside those guardrails, have the discussions as a team so that you're understanding, okay, this is an exception for this reason, and maybe that actually impacts the way we do our next project. It's not like this, okay, we chose a methodology, we're going to be agile and everything's going to be perfect. It just doesn't work that way. You still have to think, you still have to work on that methodology over time, and to keep yourselves good at what you're doing.
Yeah, you also when you get new starters coming on, you need to put energy into them so they understand your methodology, and then it will keep it, that will continue then, won't it? The process will be followed. It's when, if you don't do that, then that's where things start to maybe sort of go awry a little bit, because people just introduce their own ways, which could be okay, but understanding how they should work in your organization is really important, so that you can keep people following the same process.
And if you find that you have an exception, like every time you do anything, there's an exception, then it's probably the wrong methodology for you. You got to think about how to tune that.
So I'm really interested in how you introduce potential or dark citizen developers to this level of governance and this additional skill set. How do you persuade them that it's a good thing that they really ought to be working to? How do you wrap them with the support and make them feel both loved and enabled?
Yeah, and I think that's something we had on a previous slide, is usually in the level 300 and 400. When we think about team and team building, we go through the forming, storming, norming, performing. And we notice that at the 300 or 400 level, that when we talk about development, kind of maturing, that there's kind of this point at which that the citizen developers become part of the team. But I don't think in most organizations that happens early on. I think typically IT is kind of their own little silo. And at an enterprise planning level, this is a big issue across a lot of organizations, is that, IT kind of does their own thing over here and citizen developers do their own thing in the business. And I think when you become more mature and you have a process and you follow the process and you understand what you're building, I think, to Zoe's point about feeling threatened by the business out there building their own things, that now all of a sudden, because you feel good about yourself and you're mature in what you're doing, you feel less threatened by those citizen developers, and you can now embrace them as part of your organization. And so they go through that kind of storming phase when you get to 300 and 400 of, wait, why are you putting rules around me? Why are you telling me what to do? Why now I have to follow your rules? But I think the point is, if instead of saying stop doing that because that's our job, instead we looked at it as a point of, there's all these people out here who can help us, then, and we embrace that and we bring them in and we share that knowledge with them, I think we just become that much stronger as an organization. And we now have that intel of them, knowing the business better than we do.
Yeah, I do think as well, having worked at an organisation that was introducing Agile across the entire business, a new methodology won't typically be introduced and adopted fully overnight. It takes time to kind of bed it in and to get people following it and to see the difference that it can make. And it's part of the maturity curve, isn't it? The kind of more people adopt the methodology and become familiar with it, the more effective it's going to be.
Yeah, and it's about sort of, again, communicating those success stories, where it's done really well, this methodology helped us achieve this, and showing those outcomes. And that's what brings in, the late adopters and the people on the curve, the adoption curve.
And I think we've kind of talked about these different levels. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about the next couple of slides specifically, but we can go on to resources, I think, unless anybody has a specific conversation for these.
I think what Zoe said was spot on. She plucked out the the highlights. So yeah.
Yeah, these slides sort of grab the key points from the article that we've got in the repo, so that you've got a more consumable version of it. So, if you're having a discussion inside your organization and talking about, well, where do we fit into this, these slides can be helpful for you.
Yeah, if you just go back to that slide, I think my favourite line on here, which I've seen tons with SharePoint, is developers don't know the platform, so write code instead of using native features. The amount of developers I've seen over the years try to build stuff for SharePoint that you can do out of the box just blows my mind.
Yeah, and I think it's the same thing for almost all RPA developers as well. Sorry if I'm stepping on someone here, but RPA has been so hot, so everyone just tries to okay, we should RPA everything just because we want to, optimize a process here. There might be APIs. It might be the better option to actually build an API as well. But if you don't know that, I don't know.
If you're not solving a problem.
Yeah.
Well, you have that thing where you're sitting there look like this and saying, well, it's gray, seems like skin, right? As opposed to, that's an elephant. We need to feed it. We need to clean up after it. I think that sort of stepping back and looking at all of the problems that are inside an organization and trying to come up with holistic ways to solve them, components that you reuse, all of that stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't say RPA is new, but in a sense, it's, most RPA devs are senior after 1 year. That's it's a difference. I'm going to stop bashing on this now, but as an example, it's kind of like the same thing. Yeah.
I do think with RPA as well, there's just a rush to automate everything without actually stopping and thinking about whether the process needs to happen in the first place.
Yeah.
Oh, and maybe there's a better way to solve the problem that has nothing to do with code or configuration. It's about thinking about the problem differently.
Yeah, but a faster automated bad process is still a bad process. You're absolutely right, Zoe. I used to be an ISO 9000 auditor once upon a time, back in the distant days when things were in black and white. And saw so many cases where people improved terrible processes.
So shall we just step through these really quickly? If anyone has any questions or thoughts as I slowly click the next button, feel free to jump in.
We'll just jump back outside if you would. So,
sure.
Because I am a citizen developer, and I very rarely unwrap anything that looks like proper code because I can't do that anymore. But we've talked a lot in the competency about things like source code management. How do you source code manage things like Power Apps? What is the source code that is managed? Because it doesn't look to me like there's a long ream of script or code there. So how do you actually do that in the real world? And then more importantly, how do you then get the citizen developers to engage with what are often intimidating development tools or development repositories to do all that?
You can certainly you can take these. There is code. There are there's code. So a Power App. You can package it up as a solution, and you can export that and put that into source control. So we do that. We'll take a copy of something from a development environment and put it into source control, and then push it through to other environments. I do have an article which I'm starting to write about that, or how we do it. But so you can do that. So you're taking a backup of the source, and then I guess to get citizen developers on board, it's training, isn't it? What's the benefit for them? How do they understand how to use the tools, and so it's training like it would be anything. You've got to invest and put energy into training so that they understand why they'd want to do this. And when I work with our team and we'll put together a sprint of what we're doing, our devs love the fact that they can just kind of go, right, well, I do that one and then I do the next thing, and it's giving them a train of thought and a list of activities to work through, and they really like that. So maybe that's a way then of getting citizens developers to kind of understand how they're going to build, what they're going to build, and then how they're going to deliver that.
Yeah, this is Ralph here. Been quiet for a while here. Got to step in because this just a big misconception for a lot of folks is that the low code pieces, and this is not just for Power Platform, can be source code, can be CI/CD, like anything else. I mean, it may be harder because there are certain things that don't seem the same. It doesn't look like the same animal that we were touching, say, with SPFX or with some other quote unquote traditional code. But it's there. And if someone says it's not, that's the first misconception that I end up going in and doing battle with, because like, oh, you can't source code that. To battle we go. Step into the ring. I hope you brought weapons, because sign your will right now, because I'm going to give you exactly the answer on how to get through this. And this is the nirvana. Again, it may not be perfect, but the idea is if you don't even try, you don't even do it, then there's no point. You're not even trying. It's like, well, I think I mentioned earlier, if you don't believe in your tools, you're going to fail. So number one, I need to make you believe that it's going to work. If you don't believe it's going to work because there's no source control like you do in traditional dev, then that's the first thing I need to fix, perception-wise. It's not necessarily fix it, maybe fix your ALM. That's a different project. Let me at least fix your perception first. Without your perception, if you're not behind me, we can't move forward. The organization has to be behind you. In this particular case, I think of it as IT has to be a major stakeholder here behind the effort of the so-called citizen devs. IT is not going to do dev. They're too busy doing admin, right? So what IT might be in charge of devs, right? I always say that these folks should be separate, but if they're going to be in charge of it, then at least they need to be behind it, right? And part of it is to understand that all the tools are available. Do not give it up, or do not say, oh, I can't do it because you think there's no tools.
No, it's a great point, Ralph, is that IT, you're absolutely right. Like, we spend a lot of our time in support and maintenance, and we don't get to make probably as much as we want to make. And I think it's a good idea to include them as part of your resource pool and make sure that they feel like you are supporting what they're doing.
Not just supporting them, but to show that they are an important voice, that they have to say. I have my admin in an hour where I tell them, look, you may not be doing the development, but you are the stakeholder. You have a say. Before they go out and save the world, they're not going to save the world if they're going to sink and drown when the sharks come out. You're the one that probably gives them the boat, and no one's going to give you credit because you gave them the freaking boat. Come on. It's like you are in charge. You are people. You make a decision because you happen to know how things are operationally working. At the end of the day, you're the ones that are monitoring it to see that it's actually working, while meanwhile everyone else is dreaming up their great solutions without you. It's not complete. So the idea is to make them feel good about themselves and be behind us. Oh, that's my pep talk for the IT folks.
Well, and I think all that methodology that IT claims to have is not necessarily something in source control being part of that, right? It's not necessarily something that your citizen developers are going to be able to deal with, and that should be understandable. That should be something where IT is supporting them. Let us figure out how we can do source control for your Power Platform stuff. Let us run some stuff in the background that helps you, maintain standards that we'd like to have you follow. So again, it's always that partnership, which in most organizations it's lacking, right? It's IT and citizen developers, and that's how far apart my arms can go. And that's not the way it ought to be. It ought to be this, right? It ought to be, I'm building something. I'd like your help. Oh, okay, we'll help you. We'll talk about source control. We'll help you document, et cetera, et cetera. It's a symbiosis as opposed to a battle.
And this is a point that I was going to sort of, debate as well, which is, the tools which are used by pro code developers may not be the best tools, and therefore should not necessarily be imposed on the citizen developers for source code and things. I think a reasonably mature organization will make sure that the tools that are being applied across the development spectrum are appropriate to each point in that spectrum.
Right. Yeah. If you have to jump through a hoop this big, you're not going to try and jump through that hoop.
Yeah, and which is why it's so important, I think, when we talk about development and customization. A lot of times we end up going down the rabbit hole of discussing code and continuous integration and you know, methodologies, and we spend so much time talking about that. And what we really don't spend very much time talking sometimes about is analysis. And it's that idea of getting at the very, very beginning, and understanding, you know, that very first slide. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Is it the right thing? Are we picking the right tool? Have we thought about the total cost? And it's spending enough time in the analysis zone, and that can be anything from a couple conversations to a longer time period, depending on how much analysis it takes, to make sure that the effort is going into the right place. So whatever that means, making sure that we're doing the right thing to solve the problem.
And I guess, you know, doing, you know, that could, you know, if you introduce that into your governance for citizen developers, that there is something which they, you know, need to sort of just kind of, you know, fill out to kind of make them think about all those, you know, those aspects when they're building a solution. At least then you can guide them around, you know, making the right decisions and making sure that things are in place. I mean, maybe that's naive, like I'm sure that it'll be difficult to implement sometimes with certain people, but at least then they start on the right foot.
I've seen it in the wild, Simon, so I don't think it's too naive. And in
Nope.
in the wild, the place that I have seen it, the places that I've seen them do that are definitely 400 to 500 level organizations that have already put their hands around this. They already understand that that's important. And you're absolutely right. They've built a process around supporting the citizen developers.
Yeah, cool.
I just wanted to emphasize my post here is the idea is if the governance is like not noticed, if everything's flowing, process act, and you're following the process without thinking about it, that's, you know, that you've hit the maturity level. When it's obvious to you that someone is doing something and you feel like you're being touched at all times, that's when you're still at the 100. It's like, this bothers me. It's like, hold on a second. We're trying to fit it to you. We're trying to custom fit it to your to yourself. When you're just walking around and you feel like you're on a beach instead of walking in the snow. There you go. I have more metaphors and analogies for Simon over here, but especially snow. But the idea again is you are mature when you have abstracted things to the point where like it's automated. The automation is unnoticed. Baby Skynet rules you and you don't know it.
I want to make sure we can get to the resource slide because I know Zoe's added a couple of links that she that matter to her. One of the things I noticed is that we dropped the level 500 slide. I found it in one of the old versions. Aren't versions great? Yeah. And I've dropped it back into the deck, so it'll be there when you if you want to download these slides. Zoe.
Thanks, Marc. Actually, I can't take any credit for these links. These were, well, some of Sharon's favourite links, I think, last night, and one of Simon's as well. So I'll hand over to you two.
So the two that I put on here, I mentioned that I think a lot of times customization development goes down kind of a methodology discussion path. And so the very first link I have in here is actually the IIBA. So if you guys are aware of organizations that kind of center around certain practices, the IIBA is an international group that governs how business analysis works. I'm lucky to have been part of it since the beginning, and I'm a big fan, and I'm a sponsor of our local chapter, and it's just a great group that really defines the way that business analysis should be done, and it's very heavy-handed around software development and support. So if you don't know who they are, I want to look into that. I think it's a great link just to kind of get some more information. And then they also have a body of knowledge that you can use with your organization to kind of help you define those processes and practices. And then, you know, Agile tends to be the top most discussed methodology in general. I didn't put any more for different methodologies, and I only did this because I love Mountain Goat Software, and I love Dave Cohn, and I love Mike Cohn and all the stuff he puts together. And his books are fantastic. So if you want good Agile, like estimating and planning books, user story books, things like that, there are some of the few things that I actually pay for and have on my bookshelf and use on a regular basis. So, you know, 5 stars recommend. And then I think Simon has a book down here that he's recommended as well.
Yeah, so this book I read a few months ago. It's by sort of the pioneers of the DevOps movements, and Nicole Falls Green, Jez Humble, Gene Kim, and it's a really interesting book about how it's very business focused about, you know, how a organization benefits from the principles of lean software and DevOps, just thinking about things like the well-being of developers and that side, which is, we're hearing a lot about in the Microsoft 365 with the Viva suite. But it's interesting about organizations which adopt these, they're more profitable, they have less employee burnout, they're just generally organizations which are nicer places to work and better places to work, and also they have the profitability as well. So yeah, it's a really, really fascinating book. Highly recommended. Right. Got 3 minutes, haven't we? And so one thing, someone was asking, where do we think the Power Apps Center of Excellence should be in our maturity model? Be interesting to see what people think of that.
I'd say 300.
Yeah,
I think I saw someone else put that in the comments as well, but that's where it feels right to me.
Yeah.
I think we implemented at 300. I think by a 400, or you're using it and have it, kind of settled to your organization. And then I think with, like, to Ralph's point, if you're not thinking about it and you don't know any different, you might be at a 500. But implementation, definitely 300.
Yeah, definitely need to update the competency, because I think I was released after this was written, actually. So
Yeah, if any of you who have a focus on the Power Platform want to take a pass through the article as it stands and suggest edits, we're absolutely open to that anytime. Well, we've added that link into the resources, so that'll be there when we publish the slides, which will be right after the call. Any final thoughts, Zoe, as we wrap things up?
Just to say thank you. It's been a really enjoyable discussion, so thank you for having me.
Go back one slide. There we go. So you're very welcome, and thanks for spending the time. We really appreciate it. Just a couple of links here to take away if you haven't joined us on the call before. These links will get you to the recordings for prior sessions, the slide decks from prior sessions. Just to reiterate, the next call will be on September 20th. We're taking the next 3 months off. We're all going to go and have fun in the summer. If you want to keep track of what's been going on with the maturity model and with the community docs, those Twitter accounts at the top are good to follow. There's not a lot of noise and traffic there. It's generally announcements of new articles or information about upcoming sessions. So worth following and keeping track of things. Thanks everybody for coming. Any last words from anyone else?
Have great holidays.
Yeah. Have a great summer. Thank you, Zoe, for being here.
Thanks,
Zoe.
Thank you.